No haunted island is complete without a spooky haunted castle, and this one does not disappoint. Here is my take on a spooky haunted castle for the island of Lockwood. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Liz, aka My Pastel Past, and today we are making a castle for my haunted Halloween island of Lockwood. Now, to begin, before this island even got started, I wanted to at least create a border where I knew where my house was so I can build around it. So that was done before I started recording, just so I would have the spacing in mind, because I wanted it to be pretty much at the center back part of my island. So for this, it's like the main center point of the island. I've created a castle once before in the past, but I didn't quite do it right, and I've also trapped myself inside of that build, so I made it a personal goal of mine to get through this build without trapping myself. And if you would like to see me trap myself in a build, I'm pretty sure I have it up as a short on my channel somewhere, where I got trapped inside of one of the gazebos as I was building that castle. Those were the good old days. Actually, I think that happened almost a year ago. That video is almost a year old now. It's been a very long time since I've built a castle. But my house is on the very first floor of the island. It's completely covered. I have a pipe in the middle so I can get out. And then I have the third and the second floor. And the third, I have it at the very back. I wanted to use the plaza arches, the plaza clocks, I believe they're called, the castle walls, the castle towers, and then the skeletons, armor, and the golden candle. I want to call it a candelabra, but candlesticks, I think, is what they actually call it in game. I think that's what they call it in game. Yes. But that's basically all the items I'm using in this build. I went back and forth with how I wanted to do it for a while, hence why I already had it mapped out. But in the end, I decided to have it at the highest point at the very back behind my house just to cover it even more. And then as we get closer to the front, I have some gaps here and there, so it's not just all castle walls. I wanted to kind of add some dimension to it. That way, when you're looking at it from the back, you can kind of see, oh, there are towers behind it. So we kind of use that third floor level cliff. I actually don't know what the official Animal Crossing term is for it. Is there an official Animal Crossing term? Is there an official Animal Crossing terminology dictionary? And if so, I very badly need one. Because if you know me or you've seen my content at all, even though I love this game and I have over 9,000 hours in it, I know nothing about it because all I do is I build and I decorate. So if there is a proper term, let me know in the comments. And speaking of comments, I have saved you all from having to count pumpkins this speed build by not having any in here. I made it a point to not put any pumpkins on this castle because I thought it would be funny if everywhere else on my island there were pumpkins except the castle I had. I do have skeletons on this castle though, so it's still spooky and still like Halloween-esque, but no pumpkins, I assure you. But I basically go back and forth between adding the dimensions of the third level and the second. I focus a lot on the right-hand side when I was building this. I don't know why. I end up having to go back and forth a little bit between the two areas, but I tried to create towers that were closer to the front of the castle and towards the back at different heights, because in my mind, I'm thinking that makes it a castle, right? I don't know if I actually created a castle or not in the end. I'm going to call it a castle because I think it's a castle. Is it a pretty castle? No, but I mean, it's a castle. And who doesn't want a castle? I mean, I remember being a little girl and dreaming of living in a castle. Although I don't think child me would have liked this castle. They would have much preferred the very first castle I did on my original Elegant Core Island when I first started making YouTube videos. Because this would have probably freaked me out thinking, oh my gosh, it's a haunted castle as a kid. But you know what? It's Halloween time. It's supposed to be spooky. But yes, this is how I basically do my castles or any sort of big build. I try to add as many different layers of height to it so it doesn't look flat. That's what I tried my hardest to avoid. And I think in Animal Crossing, it's going to look at least a little bit of flat no matter what you do. Because of how the island curves, so you don't really get to see it on a level playing ground, so you can see the different towers unless you have a modded Switch and you have access to wide angle cameras, which if you do, I'm very jealous of you because I don't have a modded Switch, so I don't have access to that. But you kind of have that little area of flatness. You don't really get to see all the dimensions unless you have access to seeing it on like one level surface, because in Animal Crossing and your island, it curves as you move, so then you kind of see what's in the front, but then you lose the elements of the build in the very far back. But you know what? That's okay. We can't win everything, but we did our very best. I had to go through a lot of different castle towers and walls for this build, and my goodness, it was a headache. And this is what I mean when I said I focused too much on one side and I forgot about the other, because I wanted to make this as even as possible. Otherwise, knowing me and knowing how I decorate, I would have ended up having the right side be almost done and then realize I haven't done anything on the left, and to compensate for not doing anything on the left, my castle would have been lopsided, and I wanted it to be like pretty much in the center of my island, or as close to the center as possible. So I had to go back and forth a lot, and destroy a little bits of area that I did on the right to then add to the left. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm adding more cliff to the left side because I know I need to build that area out a little bit more, adding in the pathing again, and just creating those towers that I had already created in the back on the right hand side on the left now. That way it's a little bit more even. And after I got through all of this, I then learned my lesson that it was time to actually build them at the same time. And I'm doing it again where I'm placing items before I even place the paths. So then I get the joy of having to go back and destroy them again to then place the path and then place the items on top of it. I don't know why I have such an issue with that, but out of all the things I do in Animal Crossing, I somehow just cannot ever remember to place the path before the item. Do you have this issue? I can't possibly be the only one with this issue. So please let me know in the comments if you also do this the way I do it and you just completely forget to place your paths before you even place your items. At least here is kind of where I realized that I needed to place the path, but my inventory was full and I couldn't get rid of anything else. So I kind of just had to go with it and work around it. While also trying to figure out, okay, where can I place things so I can get items out of my inventory so I can then clear up that backside, which is exactly what I had to do. I had to run back to the right, see what was there, and then replace it on the left. I think it's really cool though how the skeletons pop up over the castle walls. You'll see this at the very end when I show off the finished castle look, but it almost looks like they're just peering over the tops of the castle walls, overlooking and almost guarding the castle a little bit. It gives it almost this eerie effect, which I think is super cool. And of course, I missed a candlestick, so I had to go back and destroy some stuff and work on it again, replace the items. I have to go back and forth a few times, but eventually we get to a point where it's like, okay, we've got this. Let's just keep going. At this point, though, I'm realizing that the island or the castle at the back is almost done. So I'm already thinking at this point in the build, what do I do for the front section of it? Because I didn't want to have just like a plain flat wall. So I end up trying to curve the building a little bit and have the entrance be the like up front, almost like the nose of the building, and then have it curve out sideways, if that makes sense. And then I do a very similar trick to what I did for my island entrance. If you saw that speed build, I used the jail bars and the castle gate to kind of give it that illusion. I do the same thing here because there's no direct entrance to where my house is and you have to use the pipe to get in and out of it. I have the ability to kind of create almost like this little bit of a perception or I think it's like a perception build. I think that's the official word. Oh my gosh. That's gonna be embarrassing if it's not. Oh well. I embarrass myself so much on this channel. Like, what's the point at this point? It's just, it's who I am. Oh well. But we're going to create a few more towers here before we start on the gate section, which is what I'm most excited to show you all. But again, because this is a castle speed build, I didn't want to leave any of the other elements out of it, just in case someone else was looking at doing a castle as well. Now, I will say at this point in time with the castle, one thing that I had to keep in mind was the amount of space I had and where my other towers were. Because what I didn't want to do is to put a tower directly in front of another tower. I either wanted it to be exactly to the side or slightly overlapping, so there was like one in the distance behind and one a little bit farther up in front. To again add that different dimension to it. Otherwise, you're just going to have tower in front of tower and you won't see anything. So that was a big focal point for me. I have a tower right now right to the right of the one below, and it's just slightly to the left of the one farther back of it. That's on the same level. So it's just, again, by being aware of the towers that I've already placed and then placing the new ones so they're not completely covering whatever I have built in the back. And then also adding the walls to the barrier. I knew that this is as far up and to the side as I wanted to go for the second story. So then at this point, I just had to kind of fiddle with it a little bit and change up some things. And of course, add a few more skeletons here and there, because why not? You can never have too many skeletons. Then again, I said that with pumpkins, and we all saw, or I'm going to assume that we all saw what happened with my courtyard. So maybe there is such a thing as having too many skeletons, but you know what? I will leave that decision up to you all. Is there such a thing as too many skeletons and too many pumpkins? I will say I'm proud of myself. I resisted the urge of placing a single pumpkin here. But I did place more skeletons. And it was at this point that I started on the gate area. So I placed the castle wall and then the gate in front of it a little bit, and then the castle gate even further up. That way, when you're looking at it from a distance, it kind of looks like there's this pathway from the gate towards the castle, to kind of create that illusion. I even added a piece of armor there. That way it's like the guard that's, or it is the guard that's guarding the castle. I don't know why that's so weird to say. It feels weird to say the guard that's guarding the castle, even though that's exactly what's happening. But it creates that illusion of a gate and a larger entrance area into the castle. Even though it's not actually accessible through that, you'll have to find my pipe, which I still have to find a place to hide that still, because I don't necessarily want a giant green pipe in the middle of my haunted castle city island. I don't think that quite fits. The pipe is very much a Mario pipe. So not necessarily given the most haunted vibes with that, unfortunately. But at this point, we're finally adding some items to the base layer. This is what I mean when I say, like, this is the nose of the building, so it's like the most upfront. And then I kind of create this curvature with it, so I add a little bit more to the second cliff story, but I don't actually place any items up there. I will, however, go and add pathing there. And I think I add like a piece of armor or two, and that's it. But I don't actually add any more castle items, just so it could still have that effect of it being like curved along, and it's different. I keep using the same word, dimension, but I didn't want anything to be flat. That was my biggest thing, because I know I have this issue with builds where when I'm building them, I make them very flat. So I'm really trying hard with this build in particular to have more curves to it, to have items that are closer up and further back, and make sure that they're not just like, oh, it's just a flat wall of castle walls. Instead, it's like, oh, okay, this is an actual building. So that was like the main area of focus when it came to this build, and then adding the details like the armor and the skeletons just to make it seem like, oh, okay, this is a castle. Because I feel like when you go out to a castle, their suits of armor lining the castle walls. Maybe not skeletons, but armor, yes, unless maybe they're doing something for Halloween, and in that case it's a possibility of there being skeletons, but you wouldn't normally go to a castle and see skeletons, you know, as cool as that would be. But now that that's done, it's really just adding in the final pieces of the path. I actually just like kind of lined the entire side areas with the path. That way I could place all of the towers, and then making sure that there are paths underneath each item. That way when I eventually do the pathways leading up to it, it doesn't have that weird gap in the grass. You might have noticed when you place custom codes, it has this tiniest of lines between the cliffside and the floor, or not the floor, the grass. And I don't know why that bothers me, but it does. So I always try to make sure that there are pathways underneath items now. Otherwise it'll just bug me, especially if it's visible. It ruins the effect. Just by the tiniest amount, it ruins the effect. But once that's done, we're just replacing all the items, doing the finishing touches like the golden candlestick, candelabra, and then adding the castle walls all the way around, so it just kind of rounds it off. That way, even if you're on the right or the left hand side, you can still see the castle. Here I am now adding the path, and I actually end up skipping through this because I place so much paths on both the right and the left. And now we're just finishing up with the castle wall, adding in another skeleton in the corner because it wasn't enough room to add another wall or a tower. So we're like, you know what, a skeleton will work just fine. And then kind of covering it up again with more of the castle walls and the castle towers, because why not? Why all the towers and castles? Although I will say having the two towers there creates kind of like an interesting opening where I really hope I placed a suit of armor in there, but I might not have. And if I didn't, then I definitely will be going back in after this. Okay, I did put, okay, I put a skeleton. You know what? A skeleton's okay. A suit of armor might have been better, but a skeleton is okay too. And I basically just do the exact same thing on the opposite side of the castle. It's very much, this castle tries to be symmetrical as much as I could possibly make it symmetrical, just so that no matter what side you're on, it's still exactly the same. And that way when I'm building around it, I know exactly how much space I have and it doesn't look awkward on the map. Even though I will say this now, the map for this island is not as pretty as some of my past maps. So sad to not have a pretty map, but I'm kind of happy with the castle. This is what it looks like in the end. Even with me trying to create dimension, it still looks fairly flat, but you know what? It's okay. I think it still looks good in the end. This is the castle at night, where you can kind of see all of the different glowing candelabra items, which I think really add to the haunted castle effect, especially with the little skeleton heads that you can see going up. I'm just going to create like a little bit of a cliff right here so you can kind of stand up and seeing it from higher up. I don't know why, but my builds, I like seeing them when I'm standing up on the cliff. When I'm down below, I feel like I can't see everything. So I'm just creating that little cliff side to see it. And even Coco is like, ooh, it's a castle. Let's see what's going on. But this is the completed castle. This is like my first time ever doing a speed build of a castle. So I hope you all enjoyed it. If you like this video, please consider hitting that subscribe button and hitting that like button. It can really help out the channel. But thank you so much to everyone who stuck around and watched this speed build, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!